Hello, everyone. We are continuing on with our N5 lessons today, and we are jumping into one of the most commonly used verb endings in Japanese. We're talking about that, and one more thing, we're talking about want. Basically saying, please give me that, or I want to do that, and variations thereof. And so we're going to jump into that topic and see how we can start expressing our wants, our desires to other people. And let's go ahead and jump into that. We're going to start with the first one. Usually when you talk about want, there's two different categories. One is you want a thing. You know, I want a hamburger. I want a tissue. I want that magazine over there. And you're asking for something. The other want is usually talking about what you want to do. You know, I want to go to Japan. I want to eat a pizza. I don't want to go to school. Things like that. Let's talk about the things one first. Asking for something physical or otherwise. And one of the most common ways of using this is when you're ordering. And this is one of those things that when you go to Japan, there's a good chance you're going to be having some Japanese food. And so even though you might be able to avoid the Japanese in other situations, hotels usually have English speaking staff. You know, you get to a restaurant, you're probably going to need a little bit of Japanese in there. Japanese, it could be a convenience store and you're asking for, you know, chopsticks or what have you. These are perfect. Now, we're going to talk about two versions of it. One is definitely N5 beginner level. The other one is not. But because it's so similar, we're going to toss it in here just so you have it. And when you see it, you know, in the future, you'll say, that's what that means. So there's two different ways that you can use this. And the first one, this is the one that is most common, is O. And this O is the direct object marker O that we've used before. O kudasai. That's it. O kudasai. And the way you do it is you just ask whatever it is you want, you stick that before the O. So the cool thing about this is we're talking about sentences, completely natural sentences that are only 3, maybe 4 words long. And it's nice to say something short without, you know, thinking, I sound like a child. But this is nice and short. It's great. And the difference between these two is basically formality. And let me show you what I mean. Most of the time, we talk about polite forms, and we'll get to casual in a few weeks. But we're talking about polite Japanese. Polite Japanese is your safe Japanese. You can use it anywhere and not, you know, upset anyone. However, you might hear in more formal situations, you know, something that's a step up. It's a bit more polite or formal. And that's the second one. And I'm going to go ahead and say it. Feel free to say it quietly to yourself after I say it. O is the same. O kudasaimasen ka? O kudasaimasen ka? Now, you really wouldn't put the break in between the two words, so more naturally be O kudasaimasen ka? And they mean exactly the same thing. The only difference is that O kudasaimasen ka is a bit more formal. Now, just because some of you are probably wondering, let me take a couple of minutes and kind of tell you what's going on here. I recently had a question that someone said, why are you asking for something here, but you're using the negative? That doesn't make sense. That's like, please don't give me this, right? And that's not the case. In Japanese, and you will start to see it more and more often, this is the first time we'll see it, or maybe the second time, you will often see it's not a double negative, but you will see a negative form of the verb used to, in a sense, lessen the strength of what you're saying. You know, you're lessening what you're saying. So instead of saying, please give me something, which is still polite, but it's very direct. Please give me that. You say it, you're expecting them to give it to you. If you want to soften the request, which is extremely common in Japanese, a lot of Japanese is not direct language, it's more indirect. You don't say something as strongly as you might want to, you take a step back. And that's what the negative form is doing here. It is not being used to say not give. It is not saying that. You are still saying please give me, but you're doing it in a softer way, a softer, more indirect way. And I would say that, for most of us, in most situations, you will not need to use this. You won't. You'll only need the kudasai. However, you're going to hear it from time to time. And if that's the case, you probably want to know, oh, they are asking me for this, and not saying, oh, they don't want this. So go ahead and hold on to that. So this is not the negative form. This is a softer way of saying it. Now, I mentioned that the O is, the direct object marker. You're saying please this. So what is kudasai exactly? Like, what is that word? If you ever have O, you always have a verb coming after it. Saying I eat curry. Kare o tabemasu. But this isn't a verb, is it? If you look at the second version, that more formal version, you'll say, hey, kudasai is in there. It's just got some extra stuff added to the end of it. And so while I don't know for sure, I think of it as, and this is probably the case, that kudasai became a shortened, more commonly used version of kudasai masenka, where they just kind of chopped off the back half of it. But it is indeed a verb. You are asking them to give you something. So let's see some examples. So let's say if you are at a restaurant and you're ordering something, and hopefully if you go to Japan, you try the ramen out. Despite it coming from China originally, Japan has its own form of ramen, and it's amazing. And you could say ramen no kudasai. And you could see this translated as different ways. You could hear it as ramen please. It might be a ramen please. If you aren't specifying how many of something there is, then they assume it's one. But you're asking for the ramen. So let's practice this just a little bit. Think about whether it's a food or a drink. Let's say you're at a restaurant that serves everything. Everything in the world is at this restaurant. And let me know, what is it that you are ordering? So take whatever it is and stick it just before the o kudasai and type it out for us. Like I said before, this is not required. You're not going to get called out or anything, but it's a great time to practice. And so I recommend you giving it a shot. One of the nice things about this, as you've seen, is, again, this is the entire sentence. You don't need to specify who you're talking to because it's pretty clear. And then there's nothing else. Now, while people are answering, let me ask you, don't type out the answer, but think about how would you say, just think about it, how would you ask for two different things in the same sentence? How would you ask for two different things? Just think about it in your head. If you're asking for, I'm just going to grab the last two things that people said. Well, if you're asking for ramen and water. So think about that. Okay, I've seen the other answers have cooled down some. So what do you think? If you're asking for ramen and water, how would you say that? see one person answered. I'm going to let a few more people answer before I comment. Now, don't forget, this is a beginner lesson, so let's generally hold off on the kanji. Although if you do type in kanji, if you could put the hiragana next to it, that would be great. Okay, so I see a lot of people using the to, which is correct. You know, the to is just linking two nouns together, and so if you're asking for water and ramen, ramen and water, you can just say, if we were to call them A and B, you could say A to B o kudasai. And if you can't type, if you don't have Japanese installed on your computer or device, whatever you happen to have, do this. We have no problem with romaji. You know, it's nice to write in hiragana or whatever. But I would much rather you practice with romaji than not practice at all. And so this is a use what you can use. Totally okay. If you want the same thing that someone else asked, onaji might be a bit it might be a bit vague, depending on the situation. I might say watashi mo, but I would probably, because in a ordering situation, there's other people talking, there's noise and whatnot, I would probably be safe because I want my food coming out the right way. I'd say this, watashi mo, and then repeat what they said. Because let's think worst case scenario. If you say the same thing they said without saying watashi mo, like me too, then the other person might, the waiter, waitress, waitstaff, they might think, oh, they're just repeating it. Wait, do they want one of those or do they want two of them? Especially if you're a foreigner, and I'm guessing you all are, then for us, we might not be getting our Japanese across correctly. So our friend might help us by repeating what, if my sister can't speak very well, but she tries, I might want to repeat that to help her out. And so there's all these chances for confusion. And so I would probably say watashi mo, which means me too, and then add on that order after that. Now, just real fast, the one down below there, again, you probably won't hear this, but if you are in a more formal situation, you can use kudasaimasen ka, but you are basically asking for the same thing. Now, a couple of notes. One, we've been asking for physical things so far, food and drink. This can be used for some non-physical things. The thing I hear most often is this. Chikano kudasai. Please give me some time. So you can ask for more physical things, but there's a lot, I can put anything in there, so I'm going to ask for love. Please give me love. And that doesn't really work, But chikano kudasai is very common. Now, let's jump off a little bit, and we're going to come back to the second half of the lesson, but I'd like to talk about this a little bit more. So what if you want two of something? Not two different things, but you want two of something. This is a topic that we don't yet, not yet. We don't have a fixed place to talk about it in Renshu, aside from our game, Counterpunch. But we need to talk about counters just a little bit. And if you already know what a counter is, you're probably thinking, oh, no, not those. And that's what a lot of us feel like, because in Japanese, a counter is basically a way of counting something. And what makes, how do we count things in English? We say 1 dog, 2 dogs, 3 dogs. and we might say 1 plate of curry or, 2 bowls of curry if it's in something else, but we usually just use the numbers. 1 person, 2 people, 3 people, things like that. It's very different in Japanese. Depending on what you're talking about, the counter, the 1, 2, 3, 4, changes. So the numbers that someone just put up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can't use those. Those aren't counters. Those are numbers. If you say, for example, ichi ramen, that actually sounds like the name of a special type of ramen, like the #1 ramen, ichi ramen, this is the best kind of thing. So you cannot use those. And we're not going to go into all the different types of counters, but there is one counter that can be used for a lot of situations. It's kind of a generic counter. There's some places you can't use it, such as people, but since we're talking about asking for things, it's perfect here. And you call it, it's got different names, but it's the tsu counters. And tsu, I'm going to just go through a few, and then at the end of today's lesson, I'm going to show you where you can review these on Renshu, because we've got a place, and it's awesome. But tsu, the first one is, it's not only food things, it's just usually general objects. But it's the most generic counter. So I am going to say, everyone that's typing, stop typing just for a few seconds so I can get these out in a row so they're not separated. Oh, sorry person. I'm going to delete your message just so my mind get stuff together. Sorry. Okay, there's 1 through 9. And so the first one, hitotsu, means like one thing. The second one is 2 things, 3 things, 4 things, 5 things. And I'm oversimplifying it somewhat, but if we are going back to our restaurant situation, these are perfect. They're perfect. Even when some of you might be thinking, well, if I'm ordering a glass of beer or a bottle of beer, I wouldn't use this. I would use hon because that one's more appropriate. That's true, but you can still get by with these. So these are super helpful. Now, how do you actually say this? One person just typed out one of the answers, but there's actually 2. There's 2 ways you can use these. And let me show you. I'm going to give you the kind of the generic version. Here's one of them. And this is what the person said just a little while ago. It's not itsu, it's itsutsu. Itsutsu. So if you're asking for something, then you would say, for example, if I'm ordering for my children and they love ramen. So if ramen's available, they are getting ramen. I would say this. I'd say ramen of 2つください. One more time. Ramen of 2つください. Now, real fast, let's practice this a little bit. After tsu, there's real fast. I don't want to get into too much discussion with that. The next one is to. And then after that, you switch over to the regular numbers. But you usually aren't counting that high about generic objects. There's usually a better one to switch to, and then if you're ordering, you probably don't order past that. So most of the time, like the times I say to is few and far between. It's just, it doesn't come up. And for most things, there is a better counter that once you learn them, you will start to use those. And those are more flexible up to, an absurdly huge number. But let's practice this real fast. I'm going to tell you something in order. And please, let's say I'm the person sitting next to you and I can't speak Japanese. And I'm telling you what I want to order. So please order for me. Okay? Let's give that a try. Please order for me. How about And because you might not know this word, I'm going to type it out. How about 2 colas? How would I ask for 2 colas? And as most of you know, this isn't a race to see who types it first. I love seeing the same answer come up, multiple times. Now, the person that just answered, they jumped ahead, which is fine, but they used the second version of it, which I'll clarify in just a minute. I did mention there's 2 versions of using it. No, you're fine. You're fine. Don't worry about it. They're both completely natural, so people that know it jump in between the two, without thinking about it. So I see a whole bunch of people saying "Kora o futatsu kudasai." There's not a small tsu in there. Yeah, there we go. Okay, let's try one more. How about 3? And this time I'm not going to tell you what the Japanese is, so just think about it. I need 3 coffees. I'm really sleepy. So give me 3 coffees, please. What would I say? Looking good, looking good. Now, as people are typing, if you're typing, go ahead and finish up what you're typing. Please do. Let me take the answers that everyone is putting up and show you the other option that someone else typed a bit earlier. So you can throw it in front of the object, the thing that you're counting. And this isn't just here with orders. This is anytime you're using counters. You can say mitsu no kohi. So 3 coffees. There's some situations, we won't get into this much detail, where you can only use one or the other. It wouldn't make sense. You're using no. We had a lesson quite some time ago, and I definitely recommend looking at it. I think it's one of our better lessons. I think they're all good, but this one's particularly good because a lot of people have, this is just because of the way the textbooks teach it, a lot of misconceptions about no. No is not a possessive. Oh, no, don't apologize. It's a good question. No is not a possessive marker. It's not. That is one translation of it, but I don't think it's accurate to say it's a possessive marker. What no does is it adds information to something else. That's all it does. And so if you have an object and you want to, and you say kohi, now that's such a general thing. Like coffee. What coffee are we talking about? We're talking about this coffee, that coffee, all the coffee, 1 coffee, 2 coffee, black coffee, brown coffee. What? And so anything that comes before no helps take that word and restricts it. It gives it more information. It specifies it more. So instead of talking about any and all coffee in the world, we're saying mitsu no kohi, 3 coffees. Oh, I see. They're talking about the number of coffees. And that's why you see it translated as a possessive marker sometimes, because if you were to say watashi no kohi, okay, we're not talking about any coffee, we're talking about the coffee that's mine. And so possessive is a common usage of no. But in general, no is used to add information onto that word. Take that word and make it more specific. But that was an excellent question. Thank you for asking. There is a name, but I can't think of it at the moment. And in fact, I'm going to forget because we won't come back to counters. So let me real fast show you all. Hopefully you're looking at my screen share, or if you're watching this video, it's on the right side of the video. If you're in Renshu, go into the menu and go down to games. We have a bunch of games. And hey, Counterpunch, we were just talking about counters. If you go to Counterpunch, then you'll see we have not every counter, there's tons of counters, but we have most of the common ones here. And it not only explains to you what they are, mai is used for these flat objects, hon is used for kind of round cylindrical things, hiki is used for animals. Not only do we have all these and you can play them, but once you jump into one, for example, this one's to practice count numbers 1 through 5, it will help give you information here. It tells you, oh, it's used for these. It also shows you how to write them. So definitely check Counter Punch out. It's a game. Everyone likes games, I think, and it is particularly helpful. Okay, let's jump into the main chunk of today's lesson. And all the other videos are on the page that I just mentioned. If you're in the menu and you go to resources, Japanese lessons, they're all in there, every single one. Okay, let's talk about wanting to do things. Because every day there's something we want to do or something we don't want to do. So this is a usage that we can apply to everything and anything, almost at all times of the day. And this is our I want to. Our I want to phrase. Now, this is really important. And we'll talk about this a bit more at the end if we have time. But when we use this, when we say I want to go to Japan, we can only, now there's an asterisk at the end of this, there's exceptions. We can only use this to talk about our own feelings. Most of the time. We can only talk about our own actions, our own feelings. As in, I want to go to Japan, I don't want to eat that. I'm assuming there's an I in there. Now, what about other people? If we have time, we'll talk about that, but it is a more complex topic. It's not one that you usually see in N5 levels. And so I might mention after the lesson is done, but just remember that this is for the speaker's actions. Whoever is speaking, it's about their actions. And we'll talk about those other ones later. Now, what does this tai actually mean? This is the ending that we attach to the verb stem. Now, do we remember what verb stems are? We've talked about them before, kind of mentioned them from here and there. The verb stem, as I describe it, is the mas without the mas. Because we should all be familiar with the mas forms. So if we have tabemasu, tabe is the verb stem. If we have shimasu, shi. We have mimasu, mi. We have tachimasu, to stand up, it would be tachi. These are verb stems. To make the I want form of the verb, all we have to do is take those verb stems and add tai to the end of it. That's it. So, for a few examples, I typed up just a while ago. So, taberu, to eat. First, if you need to take that intermediary step, that's totally okay. Conjugate it to the mas form. So say tabemasu. Okay, chop the mas off, tabe, and then add tai, tabetai. Now, the way that Renshu is explaining it is that for our ichidan verbs, those are the ones that we always just drop the ru and then we add things. In that sense, we're just dropping the ru and adding tai to the end. So taberu, tabetai. Neru, netai. With all those other verbs, the Godan verbs, the ones that have the spelling changes, we're taking those steps. We're changing the bu to a bi, for example, with asobu. The same way we'd have asobimasu, asobi. We've got that bi. Then we're just adding tai to the end. So asobitai, kakitai, ikitai. These are all different versions that we would use. Lastly, we've got our two special ones. Suru is shitai. And because suru is used with so many words, you hear this one probably the most often. And kuru is kitai. Now, let's practice this. Let's practice the spelling just a little bit. This one, we're not going to do full sentences, just single words. I'm going to give you the verb. You give me the Thai form, the I want version, okay? And again, it's not a race, so I'd love to see, we've got 24 people in here. I'd love to see at least half of you. If I get 10 answers for each one, that would be awesome. Even if you make a mistake, who cares? Just give it a shot. Okay, let's get started. Yomu, to read. How do you say, I want to read? Good, good. Okay. How about iku? Okay, let's keep going. How about, this is kind of a tricky one. No special rules, but just it kind of feels weird. You like to say, like, I want to say this. I want to tell them I love them. Something like that. You do have that double E there, so it's itai. And you do have to say it longer. You can't just say itai, because then you're saying ouch. But itai. Okay? How about if you want to make something? Good. I see a few different answers coming here. Tsukuru is the ichidan, which means we're dropping that ru. It's not ichidan, excuse me. It's godan. We're changing the ru to a ri and adding tai. So it's tsukuritai. Now, we all have this feeling from time to time. What if you want to just scream out? Sakebu. You just have some stress built up. We all have stress. And you just need to let that stress out. Sakebu. I see mostly right answers, looking good. Be careful, it's sake, not saki, sake, sakebitai. Okay, and one more. Don't cheat and look on the screen share. Try and, without looking there, answer. Suru. Looking good. Great. Now, as we continue, let's take a look. It showed this before. These are sentence enders because, verbs end the sentences typically. And you can end the sentence with the Thai form and nothing after it. That is more casual. The polite form, which I'm going to ask everyone to use, would be des. Which is kind of strange, right? Like, why is it des? Why is des coming here after a verb? Don't answer if you know why, but I'll give you a hint just so you can kind of think about it in your head. But if you know the answer, don't say why. It has to do with the last character of Thai, that E. It has to do with that E there. Okay, just hold on to that. Just think about that for a little while. So I'm going to say, please use the des form. And we were talking earlier about, kudasai and kudasaimasen ka and politeness levels and formality. And someone mentioned, they said, I'm a very straightforward person. And so it would be hard for me to be that roundabout. With politeness in Japanese, I've said this before, so if you've heard this before, sorry, but casual does not mean friendly. Or casual does not mean relaxed. in the way that, you might say, I have a relaxed personality. The way I approach people is as if I've always been friends with them, and I speak to them very casually. It's like, hey, how's it going? Even if I've met them for the first time. That's not the same in Japanese. You can't say, I want to sound friendly, so I'm going to use casual forms. Casual very specifically means, situations where you're allowed to use casualness. And so I'm going to say stick to des. And someone asked about the te form, and they got an answer, but I will talk about why that's the case later on. That's a very good question. Now, good news is that we don't need anything special here for the rest of the sentence. If you can make this one change on the verb, the rest of the sentence will look exactly the same. So someone read my mind, and they put this example earlier. If you say, I want to eat sushi, you would say, sushi o tabetai desu. And it's on the screen, but I'll go ahead and type it out in the channel as well. Sushi o tabetai desu. Now, we know it's I. We know it's I. And so we don't need to say watashi wa. You might say it in certain situations, but typically you don't need to. Just like before, the rest of the sentence, what we're allowed to put in sentences, where we put them, everything else is the same. And so if you wanted to say, I want to go to school at 1 o'clock, that sounds nice. Skip the morning. You could say, ichiji ni gakkou ni ikitai. At 1, I want to go to school. Or sticking to the politeness level that we are working with, ichiji ni gakkou ni ikitai desu. Now, we have time. Let's practice. Think about something you want to do. Something you want to do, and let us know. Let us know what it is. Please do not use the negative form yet. We'll jump to that in just a minute. Let's focus on things you do want to do, not things you don't want to do. So take whatever sentence it was you had before, our normal sentences, and just switch that verb on the end to tai, and then add the des to the end of it. So I'll give you a couple of minutes. Let me know. It can be something you want to do right now. There's a cookie in front of you and you're just dying to eat that cookie. Or something in the future. I want to go to Japan. I want to get better at Japanese. Whatever happens to be. Study is benkyou suru. Benkyou is study, the noun, and then suru gets attached to it. You're very close. Game is to play games is a very interesting one because in Japanese we don't use asobu. We say shitai. So we say game o shitai. Asobu generally means more the generic, like playing with someone. Not something specific, but just like, I'm going to get together and play with them. And play isn't like child specific in the sense of like, oh, those kids are playing. You can play as an adult with friends, and that might mean that you're going to play video games. We're going to do, board games or just, have fun at the park. That's all forms of asobu. But if you're being specific and saying, I want to do games, that's actually what you would say. I want to do. So suru. Although in English, we'd say, I want to play. So we have people talking about a whole bunch of different things, places they want to play. Someone wants to go to the park. Someone wants to have some scrambled eggs, or not scrambled eggs, fried eggs, excuse me. Someone wants to study Japanese every day. Have gyoza, watch a movie, watch a horror movie. I'll give you a few more seconds for those of you that are typing to go and finish up your sentence, and then we're going to continue on with the last little chunk of our lesson. Okay, I'm going to talk, but if you're typing, please go ahead and finish up typing. I love all the sentences. Now, back to my question before. Why the des? Why the des? Oh, and you can use either. I think you mean oh and not no. Ga is probably a bit more common, but we haven't dived into ga yet in these lessons, so I'm putting it. Oh, is not wrong at all. Ga, depending on the situation, is probably more common, but you're fine. So, Titus. It's weird saying it like that, but why? Does it remind you of anything else? Remember, I gave you all a hint saying it has to do with that last character. That last character. That's a hint as to what this actually is. Yeah, thank you. So, deep down in the grammar dungeon, we are actually not talking about verbs anymore. We're talking the verb is that verb stem at the front of it, and this thing that's getting added to it is actually treated as an adjective, an e-adjective specifically. So, if the Thai form is an e-adjective, then what can we do with it? Well, we can do anything that we do with e-adjectives. So, real fast, anyone, how do you say not delicious? How do you say not delicious in Japanese? Okay, one more. How do you say not hot? Not hot. Okay, thank you. So we've got oishikunai, we've got atsukunai, and we've got these negative forms. You take the ku, or excuse me, you take the e, you swap it out with ku, and then you add nai to it. E-adjective, or the Thai is exactly the same. So we've talked about what you want to do. The way you say what you don't want to do is take the exact same form and treat it as an e-adjective. And so if you're saying, I don't want to study at the library, then instead of saying benkyou shitai or benkyou shitai desu, you'd say benkyou shitakunai. Toshokan de benkyou shitakunai desu. And that's all you have to do to flip it to the negative. So, someone just threw up an example, tabetakunai. Yes, I don't want to eat. Tabetakunai. Now, we're a bit short on time, so I'm going to, instead of saying, tell me something you don't want to do, let's keep it simple. Tell me somewhere you don't want to go. Tell me somewhere you don't want to go. So remember, ikitai is the positive form. So if we have, that's the only hint I'm going to give you. Ikitai is the positive form. So drop that e, switch it to the negative, and then fill out that sentence. Now, because we are talking about destinations, we're going to use that ni particle, not the o. And someone doesn't want to go to work. Someone doesn't want to go to the dentist, which makes me want to introduce the dentist I found in Japan because they're amazing. Someone doesn't want to go to school, go to the hospital. They don't want to go to Brazil. Maybe they're not a fan of the heat. Someone doesn't want to go home. Not yet. But yeah, looking good. Now don't forget, if we're sticking to the polite form, you're going to want that des on the end of it. So ikitakunai desu. It's really easy to stick to the casual forms amongst learners because we're not going to be as sensitive to changes in politeness levels as a Japanese person, but it's really best to stay comfortable with des. Now, to wrap things up, let me note that, again, because it's an E adjective, you can do other things with it. For example, switch it to past tense and say, I wanted to come to Japan, or I wanted to go, I wanted to go there, but for example, you couldn't. So maybe your friends all went to the movies, but you were sick or you had work, whatever. So, 映画に行きたかった in the same way that, going back to the adjectives we had before, if you had hot, 暑い, it was hot, 暑かった. It's that same ending. So tai is actually not particularly hard to use because most of the spelling changes are ones we've already, been exposed to. Now we are wrapping things up and we have just a few more minutes. There are a few things I'd like to talk about, just some slightly more difficult things, but things that you're probably wondering about. But before that, if there are any remaining questions about tai, please let me know. Oh, and as you're thinking about possible questions, there's one more example on the screen. This is using the negative past form. We just talked about I don't want to go. And you can say I don't want to sleep or I didn't want to sleep. Past tense. 寝たくなかったです. And it may sound like a mouthful to get all those extra syllables out of there, but I promise you, each chunk of it gets easier to say, easier to read. For example, after time passes by, that nakata, you don't think of it as nakata. You just see it and your brain or ears instantly hear or think or say nakata. And it's no longer 4 characters, it's just one chunk that you can work with. Until that comes, you see it as individual things and you have to think to yourself, netaku nakatta. So your tongue doesn't, tie itself into a knot, but it definitely happens more. No. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that. So I'm going to say no with 99% confidence about that. Hoshi is typically for things that you want or describing something you don't want someone else to do. But the tehoshi is something not just you don't want them to do, something you want someone else to do or want them to not do. But that is a topic we will get to later on. Okay, I think we're done with the main stuff. I wanted to give you just a bit of extra information that might be bubbling around in your head at the moment. We mentioned, and you'll see right now as I flip to the last page, that again, Thai form can only be used when describing your own wants. Let me talk about that a little bit more. Now, we just talked about things that we want ourselves or we don't want, and that's fine. You can also use this to ask someone if they want to do something. So, for example, if you say, hey, do you want to go to Japan? You can say this. You can say, 日本に行きたいですか? And you might think to yourself, well, this isn't about you, but that's not quite true. It's what's happening is you are asking them for their feelings about wanting to do something or not wanting to do something. So they will be able to respond with, yes, I want to go, or no, I don't want to go. So it is okay to direct this at someone else in a question form. However, you cannot use it to describe a third party and their wants. So let me give you a situation. I have two kids. They're 5 and 7, and I know them fairly well. And so I am pretty good, as most parents are, at predicting what they want to do. So, for example, if I can tell when my daughter wants to go to sleep. It's pretty obvious. She just shuts down. But I cannot say this. I absolutely, absolutely cannot say this. I cannot say, Musume wa netai desu. My daughter wants to go to sleep. Why not? We can say that in English. It's perfectly okay. Why can't we say this? The way I've heard it taught to me, and the way that I feel is the easiest thing, is that you cannot say with 100% certainty what someone else wants. You don't know what's inside their heart, right? You might be 99% there. You can look at all the clues, all the hints. There could be, my son might be he might be ready to play Pokemon, so he's staring at the Switch and his fingers are doing the movements as if he was holding the controllers in his hand, and he's jumping up and down and he's saying Pokemon, 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 Pokemon. But I still don't know, as far as the Japanese language is concerned, I still don't know that he wants to play Pokemon. I just think. And so this tai desu is used to describe things that you know. And what's the only thing that you know for sure is what you feel, what you think. So I'm going to give a couple of quick examples, but not going to go into the grammar behind them. So how do you talk about other people then? What's the solution? There's a few different things, and actually what one person said is we basically talk about what we think they want to do. And so I'm going to use the same sentence. And now this is grammar we haven't talked about before, but I'm just giving you some examples. You might use the to think verb to say, I think my daughter wants to sleep. That would work. You could use another one. There's so many. You could say, it looks like my daughter wants to sleep. There's another way. There's different ways based on not just visual information, but you could say, it seems that my daughter wants to sleep. So many different ways to describe your thoughts or expectations or beliefs based on various bits of information. And you can use all those. If they tell you, I want to go to sleep, then you could say that. You could say, and again, I'm not expecting you to understand this, just telling you that these exist. You could say, my daughter said she wants to go to sleep. And so we never can end it with just netai. because we don't know that for sure. We're always going to use extra language to say, I think she wants to sleep. It seems like it. It looks like it. She said that she wants to sleep. And on top of that, there's also one more ending that literally says it seems like they want to do something. They're showing feelings of wanting to do something. So Japanese has a lot of different ways to talk about our beliefs and thoughts of other situations, whether it's other people, or it looks like rain, or it looks like the movie is going to be interesting. There's so many different things. Rashi, I probably wouldn't use Rashi, but I don't have time to get into that, unfortunately. But just hold on to it. If you are talking about yourself, you use tai. If you're talking about someone else, don't use it, at least not yet. Or ask them. Say, do you want to sleep? And then you can go with that. Okay, thank you so much for taking this last hour with us. And as I said, this video will be up here in the Discord inside of Renshu as well. We do have a YouTube page. We don't advertise it or do anything with it, but it's up there. And so feel free to check any of those out if you need to look at this in the future. We will have one more event next week. I think that'll be the last event of the month because I have plans the last Friday. But definitely keep an eye on either inside of the Discord page in Renshu or here in the Discord channel to see what else is coming up. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us.